Today, I will tell you a story that began with a single sentence at my own son's front door. They looked me in the eye and said I was not welcome at Thanksgiving dinner unless I apologized. What happened after that? Well, let me just say this. That same night, while they were busy showing off, I closed every account that carried their names. And later, when my phone lit up with 25 missed calls, I knew they had finally realized what I had done. Before I go on, remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy these grandma life stories. Leave a comment too, because your thoughts matter. Now let me take you back to that day in Portland, Oregon. My name is Susan. I am 76 years old, a retired high school teacher who once believed that family ties could survive anything. I raised my son Michael with patience and long nights of tutoring when he struggled with math, and I never thought I would be the one left outside his door on Thanksgiving Day. The sky that afternoon was heavy with clouds. I had baked a pecan pie, the recipe handed down from my grandmother, and carried it carefully in both hands. The smell of roasted turkey drifted from inside the house, mixed with the sound of laughter and the clinking of glasses. For a moment, I let myself believe I was about to step into warmth, to sit among family, to give thanks. But when the door opened, it was Karen, my daughter-in-law, who stood blocking the entrance. She did not smile. She folded her arms across her expensive sweater, and her eyes were sharp. "You will not sit at this table," she said coldly, "not until you apologize for snooping through the office and pulling out our private papers." Her words cut through the air like ice. I blinked, stunned, unsure if I had heard her correctly. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of my son, Michael, arranging the chairs around the long dining table. He did not look at me. He kept his head down, fiddling with the cutlery as if it were the most important task in the world. I said quietly, "Michael, are you really going to let this happen?" He shifted his shoulders but offered no answer. He would not meet my eyes. The silence was heavier than any shouted insult. Karen leaned closer. "Unless you admit what you did, you are not welcome. We cannot have you stirring up trouble tonight." I gripped the pie dish a little tighter, feeling the heat of it through the tin. My heart pounded. My own son was standing only a few feet away, and yet he stood still, a man-shaped shadow avoiding his own mother. I looked past Karen and saw the table set with polished silverware, plates of steaming sides and glasses ready for wine, a feast for everyone but me. The smell of roasted turkey that had once felt comforting now turned bitter, almost mocking. At that moment, I understood that Thanksgiving, the holiday meant for gratitude and family, had been turned into a weapon. They thought they could humiliate me, push me aside, and wait for me to beg for entry. But I did not beg. I said nothing. I simply set the pecan pie down on the porch table beside the door. The pie was still warm, its crust golden brown. I left it there like an offering, though I knew no one inside would taste it with gratitude. Then I turned and walked back down the path, the sound of their voices muffled by the closing door. Behind me, Karen's laughter returned to the room, filling the space I had been denied. Michael's silence lingered in my ears like a wound that refused to close. As I reached my car, the cold November wind bit at my face. I wrapped my scarf tighter and sat behind the wheel. For a few moments, I could not even start the engine. My hands trembled too much. I whispered to myself, "So this is what family means to them." The world outside was preparing for celebration, but I sat alone in that car, my heart sinking under the weight of betrayal. And yet, even in that moment of pain, a thought began to form. They had turned me away from the table. They had spoken with arrogance, sure that I was powerless. They had forgotten one thing. My name was written alongside theirs in places they had taken for granted. And trust, once broken, can become a sharp blade. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. I had no messages, no missed calls then. Just the quiet hum of loneliness. But later that night, those numbers would rise until they screamed for attention. 25 missed calls. I started the car and drove into the dark, the street lamps passing overhead like watchful eyes. Each mile I put between myself and that house felt like a small step away from despair and a step towards something else, something they never saw coming. That was the beginning. I walked away from that porch without turning back. The cold air pressed against my cheeks, and the laughter behind the door felt like knives in my back. I had left the pecan pie there, but in my other hand I carried something far older, far more fragile. It was a small wooden box, weathered by decades, the lid carved by my grandfather's careful hands. Inside were recipes written in fading ink, slips of paper my own mother had once tucked into it, a few stained by butter or sugar. Those recipes had survived wars, migrations, lean years, and celebrations. And yet tonight I set the box down gently on the porch step beside the pie. I whispered under my breath, "If memories mean nothing to them, I have no reason to carry this weight into their house." For a moment I lingered, my palm on the box, my breath catching. Then I turned and kept walking. Driving home, I replayed every detail, every word. My heart asked the same question again and again. When did Michael stop being my son and start being Karen's shield? The streetlights blurred through the windshield as my eyes stung with unfallen tears. In the silence, I heard my own voice whisper the truth. They don't want me. Not as I am. Only if I bend. Only if I beg. That thought cut deep, but the pain was not new. The truth is, this crack in my family had begun long before Thanksgiving. Tonight was only the sharp edge of a fracture that had been growing for years. My mind pulled me back to 2008. Michael was 30 then, proud but broken. The economy had crashed, and so had his business. I still remember the night he came to my small house, his face pale, his hands trembling. "Mom, I don't know what to do," he whispered. "The bank is closing in. If I lose the house, Karen will never forgive me. The kids will have nothing." I looked at him then, at my only son, the boy I had carried, the boy I had stayed up late with when he was sick. My retirement fund had been carefully built over decades of teaching. Every dollar represented years of chalk dust, grading papers until my fingers cramped, standing on aching feet through lessons that stretched my patience thin. But when I saw his desperation, there was no question. I went to the bank with him. We sat in the glass office of a manager who explained the option of joint accounts. "It will be safer this way," the banker assured me. "Your son will have access to help manage things if something happens to you." I remember signing the papers. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced myself to believe it was the right thing. I thought, this is trust. This is family. Michael squeezed my hand, his voice breaking. "Thank you, Mom, you saved us." At the time, his gratitude was real, but gratitude fades. Entitlement grows. What began as an act of salvation turned into a chain, binding me. Those joint accounts became less about safety and more about control. Now, years later, Karen could look me in the face and say, "You're not welcome." She could speak with the confidence of someone who knew she held strings attached to money that was never hers. And Michael, my Michael, stood by, silent. The car's tires hummed against the road as I whispered into the empty space. If memories mean nothing, if trust is twisted, then all that's left is to decide whether I remain silent or not. When I reached home, the house felt colder than usual. I set my scarf on the chair, poured myself tea, and stared at the walls. The silence pressed hard, but inside that silence was a kind of clarity. I walked to the drawer where I kept old documents, envelopes marked with dates, interest rates, and signatures. I traced my finger over the names. My name. Michael's name. The same lines binding us together in ways he no longer honored. The tea cooled beside me as I remembered the banker's voice. Joint account holders can withdraw funds at any time. At the time, I had nodded without thought. Tonight, those words echoed differently. Tonight, they sounded like a warning I had ignored, a door I had left wide open. I pressed my hands to my face and breathed slowly. Pain coiled in my chest, but beneath it was something harder, something sharper. Resolve. Michael once came to me broken. I had lifted him up. Now he treated me like a burden, and Karen like a nuisance to be tolerated. But I was not powerless. I had never been powerless. The clock ticked softly. Midnight was approaching. My phone lay on the table, still silent. I wondered if anyone in that brightly lit house was thinking of me, but I already knew the answer. For them, tonight was about full plates, wine glasses, and easy laughter. For me, it was about remembering who I was before I let their shadows weigh me down. I poured the tea down the sink and set the cup aside. In the mirror above the counter, I saw my own reflection. My hair white, my face lined, but my eyes were still sharp, still awake. I whispered, "They will not define me." The wooden box of recipes, now left behind on their porch, felt like a symbol. I had given them the past. They had refused it. What remained for me was not begging for a seat at their table, but reclaiming the ground I had surrendered. The crack in the family was no longer hidden. It was open, raw, undeniable. And I knew this. I would not let them use my own trust to strangle me any longer. I did not know it then, but while I drove home that night, someone else had seen everything. My granddaughter, Emily. Emily was 19, sharp-eyed in a way her parents always underestimated. She'd been standing near the hallway when Karen blocked me at the door. From where she was, she could hear Karen's voice drip with venom and see Michael's silence seal the humiliation. She saw the wooden box in my hands, and she saw me turn away, shoulders trembling but held high. Emily later told me she wanted to call after me, but her voice stuck in her throat. She was afraid of her mother's anger, afraid of stirring another storm. So she stayed still, clutching her phone in her palm, her breath shallow. Dinner went on without me. Plates clattered, wine glasses were filled, and laughter rose like nothing had happened. Emily sat at the far end of the table, her fork untouched. She watched Karen lean close to Michael, whispering between bites. "Tomorrow we'll talk to the realtor," Karen murmured. "That property by Cannon Beach won't wait forever." Michael nodded, his jaw tight. Emily's eyes darted to her mother's phone screen when Karen tilted it slightly. An email was open. Emily caught the subject line in bold: "Trust funds, transfer schedule." Her stomach turned. She had heard whispers before, her mother talking on the phone with phrases like, "our money," and "when the trust clears." But tonight, with my chair at the table left empty, it sank in. They weren't just spending their income. They were planning vacations, properties, luxuries, all resting on accounts that bore my name. Emily lowered her gaze quickly, stabbing a piece of turkey she couldn't swallow. In her head, words repeated like a drum. They treat Grandma's money like it already belongs to them. Her cousin, oblivious, bragged about a new laptop. Karen smiled proudly, saying, "Well, that's what family resources are for." Emily felt heat rise in her face. She wanted to shout, to pound the table, to cry out that it wasn't theirs to claim. But she knew the walls of that house. Words spoken against her parents would be twisted, punished. So she stayed quiet. She played her role. She nodded when Karen looked her way. She laughed softly when Michael made a joke. But inside, her chest ached. Later that evening, while the others carried dishes to the sink and the football game blared from the living room, Emily slipped into her mother's study. Her fingers trembled as she touched the desk lamp, casting a dim circle of light across papers and the glowing laptop screen. Emails scrolled in front of her: joint savings agreement, insurance policy access, retirement transfer forms. Every subject line felt like a stone in her stomach. They weren't just talking. They had been planning for months. She leaned closer, her heart racing. One email from a broker read, "Once the trust accounts are reallocated, you'll be in position for the Cannon Beach offer. Congratulations in advance." Emily covered her mouth. It was real. It was not paranoia. They were circling my life savings like vultures waiting for the right moment. She whispered to herself, "They've erased her from her own story." A floorboard creaked outside. Emily snapped the laptop shut and held her breath. Karen's footsteps passed by the door, steady, self-assured. Emily exhaled slowly, pressing her forehead to the cool desk surface. When she finally returned to her room, she sat on the bed, hugging her knees. She scrolled through her messages, stopping on my name. Her thumb hovered over the call button, but she didn't press it. She typed words, "Grandma, are you okay?" Then deleted them. Fear kept her silent, but love kept her awake. Through the thin walls, she heard Michael laugh at something Karen said. Emily thought about the years she had spent in that house, watching how her mother tightened her grip over every decision. She thought about the man her father once was, and how silence had turned him into a shadow. And she thought of me, standing on that porch, turned away like a stranger. Her heart whispered, "Grandma doesn't deserve this. None of this." That night, Emily barely slept. The glow of the screen burned in her memory. The word trust, repeated again and again, twisted into a weapon. She felt something inside her shift. She was only 19, but she knew the truth. Silence was no longer enough. I came home to a silence that felt heavier than the November rain outside. My porch light flickered against the damp air, and I carried the wooden box, still untouched, back inside with me. My hands trembled, but not from the cold. On the counter sat a small pot of soup I had made that morning, just in case. Lentil and carrots, simple and warm. I ladled a bowl, set it on the table, and lowered myself into the chair. Across from me, the other seats were empty. No voices, no clinking of cutlery, no bursts of laughter. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the clock. I lifted the spoon and whispered to myself, "Happy Thanksgiving, Susan." My voice sounded foreign, hollow. Halfway through, the answering machine blinked red. I pressed play. "Hi, Susan. Just wanted to say, Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you're having a nice evening." That was Margaret, my neighbor 2 doors down. Another beep. "Happy Thanksgiving, Susan. Don't be alone too long. We should catch up soon." Then a pause. Static. Another voice. "Mrs. Collins, it's the pharmacy. Your refill is ready." The messages were polite, warm on the surface, but they skimmed past me like pebbles across a pond. None of them filled the emptiness of being unwelcome at my own family's table. I sat back, folding my hands around the bowl. I could imagine the scene at Michael and Karen's house. The chandelier glowing, wine poured into crystal glasses, the table groaning under a golden turkey. Laughter rising over the football game on television, pictures snapped for social media, perfect smiles captured while I sat here with my soup. The contrast cut deep. I thought of the years I had poured myself into that family, late nights tutoring Michael when math seemed impossible, mornings spent stretching paychecks so he could join school trips, the endless hours in classrooms teaching other people's children while saving every penny for his college. And now, I was the intruder, the one who had to apologize just to be allowed in. My spoon clattered against the bowl. I covered my face with my hands, letting the steam of the soup sting my cheeks. I wanted to cry, but the tears felt lodged somewhere behind my ribs, refusing to fall. The phone rang once, startling me. I reached instinctively, but the caller ID showed unknown. I let it go. No message followed. Silence returned. I pushed back from the table and walked through the house. Every room seemed to echo with memories. Michael's old bedroom, still holding a box of baseball cards, the hallway lined with framed photos, the study where I had once balanced checkbooks late at night to make sure bills were paid. All those sacrifices had turned into shadows. In the living room, I switched on the lamp and sat in my old armchair. The light illuminated the knitting basket at my feet, half-finished scarves tangled in yarn. I reached for them, then stopped. My hands were too restless for quiet hobbies. Instead, I opened the drawer beside me. Inside lay the folder I had kept hidden, filled with bank statements, trust documents, insurance papers, joint accounts that tied my name to Michael and Karen, the very papers Karen accused me of snooping through. I had only been protecting myself, making sure I wasn't erased. I laid the documents on my lap. My breath steadied. Alone in that room, the truth hardened into resolve. I whispered, almost to the empty air, "If they see me as nothing more than a name on paper, maybe it's time I show them how wrong they are." But I didn't act yet. I simply sat there, letting the thoughts settle, heavy and certain. The phone rang again, this time from Margaret. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, Susan. I just wanted to check in. Did you have dinner with your family?" I hesitated, staring at the pile of papers on my lap. "No, Margaret. I had soup at home. Just me." There was a silence on the other end, a pause that carried more compassion than all the polite messages earlier. "I'm sorry, dear," Margaret said softly. "You deserve better." We talked briefly. About the rain, about her grandchildren visiting next week. I thanked her, hung up, and set the receiver down. The warmth of her words lingered, but the ache in my chest remained. Back at the table, the soup had gone cold. I poured it into the sink, washed the bowl, and wiped the counter until it gleamed. My body moved through the motions of order, but my mind replayed every word at that doorway. Karen's sharp command, Michael's silence, the humiliation of being treated like a trespasser. I returned to the armchair, gathered the papers once more, and pressed them against my chest. The house was quiet, but my heart was not. That night, I understood something with painful clarity. Loneliness could carve a woman down to her bones, but betrayal, it could forge steel. The night after Thanksgiving dragged on with a silence that felt endless. I had barely slept. Every creak of the old house seemed to echo louder than usual, carrying me back to that locked door, that humiliation. By morning, my body was weary, but my mind was alert, sharper than it had been in months. It was just past noon when I heard a soft knock on my front door. I pulled the curtain back and saw Emily, my granddaughter, standing there. Her coat looked too thin for the chill, and her hands clutched a folder against her chest. She was trembling, not from the cold, but from something heavier. I opened the door quickly. "Emily, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Her eyes darted around as if she was afraid of being followed. She stepped inside and whispered, "Grandma, I had to come. I can't stay quiet anymore." I guided her to the kitchen, poured her a cup of tea, and waited. She placed the folder on the table, sliding it toward me with shaking hands. Inside were printed emails, the ink still fresh. Her voice cracked. "I saw Mom's laptop. I shouldn't have looked, but Grandma, they're planning to withdraw everything from your trust, all of it, next week." The words landed like a hammer. For a moment, I just stared at the papers, unable to breathe. Then I reached for them. My fingers traced the lines, the subject headers, the casual tone of Karen's messages to Michael. Karen had written, "We need to move fast before she notices." Once, "The transfer is complete. We'll have enough for the Palm Springs property." Another email read, "Michael, don't let her near the accounts again. She still thinks she has control. The lawyer will finalize papers Monday. Trust me, it's airtight." I felt the blood rush to my face. My chest tightened, but not with weakness. No, it was fury, raw and burning. Emily's eyes brimmed with tears. "Grandma, I couldn't just stand by. They talk about your money like it's already theirs, like you don't matter." I laid a hand over hers, steadying her trembling fingers. For years I had suspected, but seeing it in black and white stripped away any last illusion. They weren't just careless children, they were predators, circling the woman who had given them everything. I lifted my gaze, and for the first time in a long time, Emily saw fire in my eyes. "Then it's time, Emily. If they want to play this game, I'll move before they do." She blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" I pressed the papers flat, studying every detail. "They think I'm blind, but I've kept records longer than they've been married. I know where the accounts are, how they're linked, every signature required. They've underestimated me." Emily leaned closer. "But Grandma, won't they notice if you change something?" I gave a faint smile, though my voice was steel. "They already set the rules. They tied everything to my name because they thought it made me easier to control. But that gives me the power, not them." Her lips parted, hope flickering in her eyes. "You're going to stop them?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I will. Not just for the money, but for the respect they stripped away from me." I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping across the floor. I walked to the drawer where I kept my leather-bound planner. Inside were notes, account numbers, contact names I hadn't spoken to in years. I pulled it out and set it beside the folder Emily had brought. For the first time, the fear that had gripped me at that doorway began to loosen. My loneliness from last night turned into determination. Emily watched me, her voice quiet but fierce. "I knew you wouldn't give up, Grandma. I didn't know if you'd believe me." I cupped her cheek gently. "You did the right thing, Emily. You're the only one who sees me as more than a burden." She bit her lip, fighting back tears. "They'll hate me if they find out." I shook my head. "No, child, they'll have to face themselves. What you did took courage, and you gave me exactly what I needed, proof." I leaned back in my chair, holding the papers once more. The words no longer cut. They armed me. Every line was a weapon. Every plan they had laid out became a trap waiting to be sprung. My mind began to race. I could already see the path ahead. The bank, the lawyer, the timing. I would not sit quietly and wait for them to strip me bare. I would act. I looked at Emily again, her face pale but determined. "Next week, they plan to take it all, but tomorrow I'll make sure they can't. By the time they realize, it will be too late." Her eyes widened. "Grandma?" "Yes, Emily," I said, my voice steady, each word deliberate. "It's time I take back what's mine." The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the shift inside me. No longer the woman locked outside her son's door, no longer the mother too polite to fight. Now I was the guardian of everything they thought they could steal. And I would not fail. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The smell of polished wood and the faint hum of printers inside the small community bank branch. I was younger then, still hopeful about what retirement would mean. Michael had just started a family, and I thought putting his name on my accounts was a way of making sure things would be smooth when I grew old. Back then, I told myself it was an act of trust, of love. The banker smiled politely as I handed over the forms. He tapped the paper with his pen and explained, "Just so you're clear, Mrs. Harris, with a joint account, both parties have equal rights. Either of you can withdraw money at any time without the other's permission." I nodded as though I understood. Truthfully, I barely absorbed the warning. All I could think was, Michael will be there for me. He's my son. He'll protect me if anything happens. I even smiled as I signed the documents. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but I told myself I was being wise, forward-thinking, a good mother. Michael stood beside me, shifting from one foot to the other like he was in a hurry. "Thanks, Mom," he said lightly, barely looking at me. He was younger, nervous about money even then. "It'll make things simpler. If anything happens, I can help handle bills right away." I remember placing my hand over his, trying to reassure him. "This is for the future, not the present. It's just a safety measure," I told him. He nodded, but his eyes flickered with something I didn't quite name at the time. Now I see it for what it was, relief that I had handed him access, a silent door unlocked. The banker slid another set of papers toward me. "There's also the savings trust," he explained. "You can add your son as co-trustee. That way, he can help manage your assets in case of illness. But remember, if his name is there, he can make withdrawals as well." I hesitated for a moment then. I remember the pause, the pen hovering above the line. My chest tightened, a whisper inside me saying, "Are you sure?" But I ignored it. I thought of Michael's children, of Karen, of the family dinners we shared back then. I wanted to believe we were bound by loyalty, not paperwork, so I signed again. The banker stamped the papers with a loud final thud. "It's all official now, everything is set." He pushed the folder toward me, and I left the bank that day thinking I had done the right thing. Walking out into the sunshine, Michael clapped me on the back. "You won't regret this, Mom," he said with an easy grin. "We're family. We look out for each other." I carried that sentence in my heart for years, repeating it whenever doubts surfaced. We're family. We look out for each other. It was my lullaby, my shield against suspicion. But now, sitting alone in my quiet living room years later, holding Emily's printout in my hand, the memory cut differently. The banker's warning echoed with chilling clarity. Either of you can withdraw money at any time. The danger had been there from the very start, written in black and white, and I had waved it away with a mother's blind faith. I let out a long breath and pressed the paper flat against my lap. The email Emily showed me proved what I had refused to see. Michael and Karen weren't protecting me. They were circling, waiting to strike. They saw the accounts not as safeguards for me, but as their opportunity. My hands trembled, not just with anger, but with the sting of betrayal stretching back decades. I thought of all the meals cooked, the bills paid, the debts I had helped Michael through. I had believed putting his name down was building security. Instead, I had laid the foundation for my own undoing. I whispered aloud into the silence of the room. I signed away my safety with my own hand. The memory seared itself into me, my younger self sitting across that banker's desk, ignoring the caution that now screamed in my ears. I saw it all so vividly, the mistake dressed up as devotion. But then, slowly, another thought surfaced. If I had once signed the papers that gave Michael power, then perhaps I could also be the one to undo them. The law had created this trap, but the law could also be the knife to cut me free. I closed my eyes and clenched my fists. I trusted him once. That was my mistake, but I won't let it end this way. The flashback ended, leaving me in the present, heart pounding, the weight of truth finally undeniable. The danger hadn't just arrived last week with an email. It had been planted years ago in that bank office with my own signature, and now it was time to take it back. The night stretched long and heavy, the kind of silence that seemed to hold its breath. I sat at my old oak table, a stack of folders spread before me. My hands hovered over them as though I were about to play a piano piece I had long forgotten. The bank book, the insurance policies, the trust documents, all of it had been locked away for years in a drawer I rarely opened. But now they lay under the lamp, illuminated and undeniable. I whispered to myself, the words cutting through the quiet. If trust has been turned into chains, then I must be the one to unfasten them. Emily sat across from me, her chin resting on her folded arms. She wasn't scrolling her phone or fidgeting with distractions. Instead, she watched me, her young eyes, following every move I made. It struck me that this wasn't just about saving myself anymore. It was about showing her what it meant to take back power when someone tried to steal it. I opened the folder with the trust documents first. The papers still smelled faintly of the ink and rubber stamps from the day they were signed. My name sat proudly at the top, but beside it was Michael's, stitched into the legal lines like a parasite clinging to its host. I ran my finger across the black print, feeling the anger rise in my chest. "Grandma?" Emily's voice was soft, uncertain. Yes, dear. Do you really have to go through all of this? I mean, it looks so complicated. I looked at her, my heart aching for the innocence in her question. Complicated is better than helpless, I said gently. Paperwork may look dry, but it can decide who controls a life. And mine, I tapped my chest with my pen, is still mine to control. She nodded, swallowing hard. I could see she understood more than she wanted to. I took a deep breath and began to sort. Bank statements on the left, trust deeds in the center, insurance policies to the right. The rhythm steadied me. For every signature I once gave, there had to be a counter-signature, a petition or a legal motion to reverse it. The law may have let Michael slip his hand into my accounts, but the law could also let me pull it back out. As I organized, I spoke aloud, half to Emily, half to myself. The joint accounts. They gave him too much power. I need to separate them. The trust. We can change trustees if it's being misused. Insurance policies? They need to list beneficiaries I actually trust. Emily tilted her head. So, you can fix it? You can really undo what you signed? Yes, I replied firmly, but only if I act before they do. That's why I need to be precise. No hesitation. She leaned forward, watching as I clipped each stack neatly. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel entirely alone. Her eyes didn't hold pity. They held respect. I paused over one paper, an old note from a banker reminding me that as long as the accounts remained joint, withdrawals didn't require both signatures. That line sent a shiver down me. Never again, I murmured, setting it aside. Emily asked, "Why didn't you do this earlier, Grandma?" I gave a weary smile. Because I thought love was stronger than greed. Because I believed family wouldn't cross certain lines. But I was wrong. And now, I can't afford to keep pretending. She was quiet after that, but her silence was heavier than words. I reached for my planner and scribbled a list. Call the attorney first thing Monday, bring trust documents, verify beneficiaries, request account separation forms. Each bullet point felt like a step up a ladder that I had been too afraid to climb. The clock ticked, steady and patient. Papers rustled, pens scratched, and somewhere in the night, a car passed by, its headlights flashing briefly through the curtains. I didn't flinch. For once, I felt like I was steering my own fate instead of watching it slip through my fingers. Emily finally spoke again. "Grandma, I'm glad you're doing this. They don't deserve to just take everything. And I'm learning from you." Her voice trembled, but it was filled with admiration. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then promise me this, Emily. Never let anyone sign your life away for you, not even if they smile and call it love." She nodded, her eyes glistening. I returned to the folders, methodical now. Every page I turned was a reminder of the trap I had walked into, but also a reminder that I still had the strength to walk out. The night went on, but I no longer felt its loneliness. I had a plan, and for the first time in years, the chains of trust were beginning to loosen. The morning air was crisp, the kind of cold that seeps into your fingers even through gloves. It was Black Friday, and while the world around me rushed for sales and bargains, I had a different purpose. I pushed open the glass doors of Wells Fargo as the first customers began to trickle in, their chatter about discounts and flat screens fading behind me. My steps were steady, even though inside my chest my heart pounded like a drum. I walked up to the reception desk, clutching my leather folder filled with documents. The young woman at the counter smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you today?" "I need to see a banker," I said firmly. "This morning, if possible." She glanced at her screen, then back at me. "Yes, we can have someone meet you right away. Please take a seat." The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. Families sat waiting, some with children tugging on coats. I chose a chair near the window, my hands resting on the folder that contained my life savings and the battles I was ready to fight. A man in a navy suit appeared minutes later. "Mrs. Miller, I'm David, one of the senior bankers here. Please come with me." I followed him into a small office with glass walls. The desk was neat, a screen glowing faintly, a pen aligned perfectly with a notepad. I sat down, placed my folder on the table, and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm here to close every joint account that bears my name alongside Michael Miller," I began, my voice steady, "and I want my portion of all funds transferred into a brand new trust account. The sole beneficiary will be Emily Miller, my granddaughter." David blinked, his professional calm only slightly rattled. He adjusted his tie, then leaned forward. "All right, Mrs. Miller, we'll need to review your identification, the current account structures, and the documents you've brought. May I see them?" I opened the folder, laying out the bank statements, trust deeds, and identification cards like pieces of evidence in a courtroom. My hands didn't tremble. This time, there was no doubt, no hesitation. As he sifted through the papers, I added, "I understand the legal implications. I know joint accounts give both parties full rights to withdraw. That's exactly why I'm here, before any further damage is done. I want control back today." David gave a slow nod. "You've clearly prepared for this. And yes, you are correct. Joint accounts mean either party has full authority. To separate, we'll need to close them entirely and reallocate funds. It will require signatures. But since you are here first, we can process your portion without delay." His words were like water to a parched throat. For too long, I had felt trapped by signatures I gave in trust, never thinking they would be twisted into shackles. Emily, sitting quietly beside me, squeezed my hand under the table. I didn't look at her, but I felt her silent encouragement. David continued, "As for the trust account, do you already have legal documents drafted, or are you creating a new one here?" "A new one," I said quickly. "Drafted today. The sole beneficiary will be Emily Miller. No substitutions, no co-signers, no additional trustees." Emily's eyes widened at hearing her name, but she stayed quiet. David typed steadily into his computer. "Understood. We'll establish a revocable living trust in your name, with her as beneficiary. This ensures she inherits directly, bypassing disputes. Do you also wish to add protections against unauthorized withdrawals?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Maximum protections, notifications for every transaction, limits if possible, and no one, absolutely no one, except me should have access while I'm alive." The clarity of my own voice startled me. It wasn't timid. It wasn't pleading. It was commanding, the way it should have been years ago. David gave me a small, approving smile. "We can arrange all of that. It will take some paperwork, but everything you've requested is possible." I leaned back, breathing in deeply. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel so heavy in my lungs. Emily whispered softly, "Grandma, you're really doing it." I turned to her and gave a faint smile. "Yes, sweetheart, and I'm doing it for both of us." David printed out forms, sliding them across the table one by one. I read each line carefully, refusing to rush. My pen glided across the dotted lines, reclaiming authority that had been slipping through my fingers for far too long. When the final signature was done, David gathered the pages neatly. "All right, Mrs. Miller, the joint accounts are officially in the process of closure. Your funds will be transferred to the new trust account by end of day. Emily Miller is now listed as sole beneficiary." I closed my eyes briefly, letting his words sink in. This wasn't just paperwork, it was victory. A quiet, determined victory. I stood, smoothing the folder against my chest. "Thank you, David. You may not realize it, but today you've helped me breathe freely again." He gave a respectful nod. "It was my honor, Mrs. Miller, and good luck. Not everyone has the courage to make such decisions." As Emily and I walked back through the lobby, the buzz of holiday shoppers surrounded us again. Yet to me, the day wasn't about bargains or sales. It was about freedom reclaimed, about chains broken. Outside, the cold morning air hit my cheeks, but it felt invigorating now. Emily slipped her arm through mine and whispered, "Grandma, I'm proud of you." For the first time in a long while, I felt proud of myself, too. While I sat in the bank office reclaiming my future somewhere miles away, Michael and Karen were living in a different world. At the Woodburn Premium Outlets, the parking lot was already overflowing with luxury cars. The air smelled of pretzels and roasted almonds, shoppers dragging carts of oversized bags behind them. And there they were, my son and his wife, dressed like a pair of influencers instead of grown adults with responsibilities. Michael strutted across the plaza with a shopping bag in each hand, his watch flashing under the winter sun. Karen had her phone raised, taking videos for Instagram, narrating as though the world should marvel at her every purchase. "Say hi, babe," she laughed, angling the camera toward Michael. He adjusted his sunglasses, grinning into the lens. "This is how Black Friday should be done," Karen squealed, flipping the screen back to her. "Look at this, everyone. Gucci finally dropped that limited tote. Of course, we had to get it." She lifted the bag like a trophy. They slipped into one boutique after another. At Rolex, Michael tried on watch after watch, holding his wrist high as if he were auditioning for an advertisement. The clerk, overly polite, murmured compliments about his excellent taste. Finally, Michael picked a gleaming model with a price tag large enough to cover a month of my groceries. Karen clapped her hands. "Perfect. It suits you, doesn't it? You deserve it." He puffed his chest. "Well, why not? We'll have access to more funds soon anyway. Mom won't stop us this time." Karen leaned in, lowering her voice, but the words dripped with satisfaction. "Exactly. This time she can't undo it. Once the accounts are cleared, it's ours. All of it." Her phone dinged with a notification. She instantly opened Instagram, uploading their latest video with the caption, "couple goals, Black Friday done right." They sat down later at an outdoor cafe, lattes topped with cinnamon foam placed in front of them, shopping bags piled at their feet like trophies of conquest. Michael scrolled through his phone, chuckling at comments rolling in. "Everyone's jealous," he said smugly. Karen sipped her drink, her lipstick staining the rim of the cup. "Let them be. We earned this lifestyle. And you know what? For once, I don't feel guilty about your mom. She had her time. Now it's our turn." Michael leaned back, stretching his legs, his voice a mixture of arrogance and relief. "She won't even notice what's missing until it's too late. And even if she does, what can she do? Joint accounts are binding. She signed them. That's the beauty of it." Karen's laugh rang sharp, slicing through the hum of the crowd. "And you thought she might fight back? Please, she's too old, too naive. The woman still writes checks at the grocery store." They toasted with their coffee cups like victors after a battle already won. The bags by their feet rustled in the breeze, each logo a symbol of greed. Gucci, Prada, Rolex, Louis Vuitton. They weren't just buying objects, they were flaunting what they believed was already secured from me. Karen tapped her phone again, recording Michael as he flipped through receipts. "Show them, babe. Show them what success looks like." He held up a receipt nearly as long as his arm, laughing into the camera. "This is just the morning haul. Afternoon's going to be even better." Karen whispered then, just loud enough for the video to capture, "Lan nai thi ba ai chung the lam gi, tien qua chung ta karoi." The bitterness in her words contrasted so violently with the sugar in her tone. They didn't see the irony, their confidence rooted in the belief that I was powerless. Around them, shoppers moved with the same hunger, chasing sales, flashing cards, bagging more than they needed. Yet Michael and Karen weren't just shopping. They were celebrating what they thought was the final nail in my independence. Their laughter echoed against the glass storefronts, hollow and sharp. To the strangers passing by, they were just another couple enjoying a holiday sale. But to me, if I had been there to see it, the sight would have been unbearable. Because while they flaunted bags of luxury goods, I had just walked out of Wells Fargo, documents signed, chains broken. They thought the game was theirs, but the board had already shifted beneath their feet. And though they didn't know it yet, every sip of that cinnamon latte, every swipe of Michael's card, every boastful Instagram story, they were spending borrowed confidence. Confidence that would collapse the moment they returned home and realized the accounts weren't theirs anymore. For now, though, they basked in their delusion, grinning into cameras, drowning in indulgence. And the more they smiled, the more the audience watching my story would grit their teeth, waiting for the justice they so richly deserved. When the banker finally handed me the stamped receipt, I felt the weight of years lift off my shoulders. It was a simple sheet of paper, black ink on white, but to me, it was liberation. The accounts were closed, the transfers complete, the trust secured. My trust, Emily's trust, no longer theirs to touch. I folded the receipt carefully, sliding it into my handbag like a sacred document. As I walked out of Wells Fargo, the automatic doors whooshed open, the crisp morning air rushing in as though congratulating me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking out as someone's mother or someone's dependent. I walked out as a woman who had reclaimed her power. The phone in my bag buzzed once. I didn't even bother checking it first. Then it buzzed again and again. By the time I slipped into the back seat of the cab, it was vibrating so violently I thought it might rattle itself apart. I pulled it out, the screen glowing with notifications. 1 missed call, 3 missed calls, 5, 10, 18, 25, all from the same number, Michael. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The little red digits stacked up like accusations. My son, suddenly frantic, suddenly desperate. I pressed the button to silence it, tucked it face down on my lap, and leaned back against the seat. Outside the window, the streets buzzed with Black Friday traffic. Families bustled with shopping bags, children tugging on parents' hands, couples laughing over early bargains. Life went on, indifferent to the war being waged over my name and my savings. The phone lit up again, vibrating insistently. This time, a voicemail notification appeared. Against my better judgment, I listened. "Mom, what did you do?" Michael's voice cracked through the speaker, sharper than I'd heard in years. "I just tried to pay and my card declined. This is ridiculous. Call me back." Now. Another voicemail followed almost immediately. Karen's voice, high and shrill. "Susan, don't you dare play games with us. We know you're behind this. You can't just cut us out like this. It's our money, too." I closed my eyes, letting the venom wash over me. Their words no longer pierced me like they used to. They sounded smaller, like spoiled children throwing tantrums after their toys were taken away. The cab turned a corner, and through the window, I caught a glimpse of a cafe where couples were sipping coffee under strings of holiday lights. I thought of Emily, her small hands trembling as she'd handed me the printed email, her whisper, "Grandma, don't sign anything, please." That moment had saved me. She had saved me. The phone buzzed again, another voicemail. This one almost comical. Michael trying to mask panic with authority. "Listen, Mom, this is serious. You need to fix this. The banker must have made a mistake. We can sort it out together. Just call me, please." I didn't. Instead, I slid the phone back into my purse and let the silence envelop me. My heartbeat slowed. My breaths grew steady. Cut to Karen at the Woodburn outlet, standing at the register of a luxury store, card in hand. "Try it again," she snapped at the cashier. The young woman swiped once more. Declined. Karen's cheeks flushed bright red. "That's impossible. We just used it this morning." Michael stormed up behind her, his own card already out. "Here, use mine." The machine beeped, declined. A murmur rippled through the line of shoppers behind them. Karen whipped out her phone, tapping furiously, her manicured nails clattering against the glass. "Call her. Call your mother right now." Michael was already dialing, his jaw clenched tight. He pressed the phone to his ear, pacing, muttering curses. The screen flashed. Call failed. Again and again. "Why isn't she answering?" Karen hissed. "Because she knows." Michael's voice was nearly a growl. "She did something. She must have shut us out." Karen's eyes widened, panic spilling across her carefully made-up face. But she wouldn't. She's too soft, too... Michael cut her off. "You don't understand. She warned us. She said if we pushed too far..." His words trailed off, the realization dawning too late. Karen slammed her purse shut, her voice breaking with fury. "Unbelievable. After everything, she thinks she can just erase us." Back in the cab, I felt the phone buzz one last time. I didn't check. Instead, I whispered to myself, steady and calm, "If trust becomes chains, I will be the one to cut them." The cab slowed as it pulled up to my house. I stepped out, the receipt still safe in my bag, my spine straighter than it had been in years. The war had shifted. The battlefield was no longer theirs. And though the calls would keep coming, I had already decided. I wasn't going to answer. It was just after sunset when I heard the pounding on my front door. The sharp, angry thuds echoed through the quiet of my living room, rattling the glass panes. I had expected this moment, but still my heart gave one heavy thump. I set down my teacup, straightened my shoulders, and walked slowly toward the door. Through the peephole, I saw them. Michael and Karen, faces tight with rage, illuminated by the porch light. Their shopping bags from the outlet were gone, replaced with clenched fists and furious eyes. "Open this door, Mom!" Michael's voice cracked like a whip. I unlocked it deliberately, letting the chain dangle in place a moment before sliding it free. When I opened the door, their anger nearly blew in with the cold night air. Karen stormed past me first, her heels stabbing the floor. "You have destroyed everything," she spat, her face flushed. "You had no right!" Michael followed close behind, his voice lower but trembling with fury. "What did you do, Mom? You closed the accounts, didn't you?" I closed the door calmly, turned the lock, and faced them. My voice was steady, not raised, not shaken. "Right? You want to speak about rights?" I let the words hang a moment, then said evenly, "When I signed your names onto those joint accounts, that was not a right. That was trust. And yesterday, you buried that trust with your own hands." Karen's mouth twisted. "Don't give us speeches. You can't just erase us from what's ours." I moved to the sideboard, pulled out the folder I had prepared, and laid it carefully on the dining table. Inside were the finalized trust papers, copies of the account closures, and the new beneficiary designations. Everything stamped, signed, notarized. Evidence they could not twist. "Sit," I said simply. "If you want answers, sit." They hesitated but obeyed. Michael dropped heavily into a chair, his knee bouncing nervously. Karen crossed her arms, eyes darting over the documents as though they might vanish if she didn't memorize them. I slid the first page forward. Wells Fargo, November 29th. Joint accounts closed. Funds transferred to the Susan Miller Living Trust, another page. Beneficiary, Emily Miller, sole. Michael slammed his palm on the table. "Emily?" His voice cracked, almost breaking. "You cut your own son out and gave it all to a child?" "She is not just a child," I answered firmly. "She is the only one who told me the truth. She is the only one who whispered in my ear, not asking for money, but begging me to protect myself. That is the difference." Karen leaned forward, her nails drumming the table like claws. "So what, this is punishment? You think you can humiliate us? After all we've done..." I cut her off, my tone still calm but sharp enough to silence her. "After all you've done, yes. Do you want me to list it? The dinners where you laughed at me behind my back? The papers you slipped under my nose hoping I wouldn't read the fine print? The arrogance of assuming I would never stand up?" Michael looked at me then, not with fury but with something more fragile. Desperation. "Mom, we need that money. You don't understand. We've built our life around it." I met his eyes. "Then perhaps you should have built your life around your own work, not mine." Silence fell for a long moment. I could hear the ticking of the old clock on the mantel, each second punctuating the gulf that now lay between us. Karen finally broke it, her voice low but venomous. "You think you're clever, but trusts can be challenged. We'll fight this." I opened another document, sliding it across the table. "Already consulted, ironclad, irrevocable, every loophole closed. You may try, but the law is on my side now." Her face blanched as she scanned the notarization marks, the lawyer's signature, the seals. She looked to Michael for rescue, but he only pressed his hands into his hair, staring down. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands neatly. "You see, I was naive once. I believed adding your names meant safety. But last night I learned that safety comes only when I protect myself. You taught me that, even if you didn't mean to." Karen surged to her feet, her voice rising. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." I stood as well, my height diminished by age, but my resolve towering. "Number. What you regret is that the chain you wrapped around me has snapped. You don't get to tighten it again." Michael rose more slowly, his shoulders sagging. He looked at me one last time, his voice hoarse. "So that's it? You're cutting us off for good?" I didn't hesitate. "No, Michael. You cut yourself off. The day you decided my worth was measured in dollars, not in love, that was the day you walked away from me. I only signed the paperwork to make it official." They stood there, lost for words. I could see the rage simmering in Karen, the defeat sinking into Michael. But I also felt the weight in the room shift, away from me and onto them. I picked up the folder, tucked it neatly back into its place, and gestured toward the door. "Now leave my house. My evening is peaceful, and I intend to keep it that way." For a long moment, they didn't move. Then Karen spun on her heel, muttering curses under her breath. Michael lingered, his eyes clouded with something almost like sorrow, before finally following her out. I locked the door behind them, leaned against it, and let out a long breath. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. For the first time in years, I realized I was no longer afraid of them. The house was quiet after they left, but I knew it would not stay that way. I gathered myself, prepared for more shouting when the knock came again. This time, it wasn't angry pounding. It was softer, hesitant. When I opened the door, Emily stood there, clutching a folder to her chest. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, but her eyes were blazing with something else, determination. "Grandma," she whispered, stepping inside, "I need to show you something." I closed the door behind her, my heart already tightening. She laid the folder on the dining table where only minutes ago her parents had sat in fury. From it, she pulled out several printed sheets, emails. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "I can't keep quiet anymore. I know what they're planning. Dad and Mom were emailing a realtor about selling the property. Not just their portion, yours too." She slid the papers toward me. I reached out, my fingers brushing across the black and white text, the bold subject lines: urgent trust liquidation strategy, projected sale of entire estate. My name was mentioned in cold legal terms, like an obstacle to be removed. Emily's voice grew louder, sharper, like steel cutting through the air. "They weren't just after your accounts, Grandma. They wanted to erase you. They wanted to sell everything while you were still alive and leave you with nothing." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy as stone. I could hear my own breathing, slow and deliberate. The betrayal, though not unexpected, cut deeper seeing it written in ink. Karen's shrill voice broke the silence as she and Michael barged back in, faces pale but defiant. They must have seen Emily's car outside. "Emily!" Karen's voice was sharp with disbelief. "What are you doing here with her?" Emily turned, squaring her shoulders. She wasn't the timid girl they dismissed anymore. Her chin lifted, her eyes steady. "I'm standing with Grandma. I'm not covering for you anymore." Michael's eyes darted to the papers on the table. "What did you show her?" His voice cracked with panic. Emily picked up the top sheet, waving it in the air. "This, your emails. You wrote about selling the estate, dividing the profits, and locking her out completely." Karen's face went white, then red, then white again. "You went through our computer? How dare you?" "How dare I?" Emily snapped back. "How dare you plan to steal from your own mother? How dare you raise me to think family means love when all you've done is treat her like a bank account?" Michael dropped his gaze, unable to meet either of our eyes. He muttered, "It wasn't like that." "Yes, it was," I said firmly, my voice cutting through his excuse. "Don't twist it. Don't downplay it. You were ready to throw me out of my own home, and now your daughter has more courage than both of you combined." Emily's hands were shaking, but she didn't back down. She planted the papers on the table with a final thud. "Grandma, you don't have to fight alone anymore. I'm with you." Karen's lip curled. "You ungrateful child. After everything we've given you—" Emily spun on her. "Given me? You've given me guilt trips, pressure, and lies. Grandma gave me safety. She gave me truth. She gave me love without a price tag. That's who I choose." Her words sliced through the room like glass. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held them back. I wanted Emily to see strength, not frailty. Michael buried his face in his hands. His voice was muffled. "Karen, stop. She's not going to forgive us. Not now." For once, Karen had no clever retort. She stared at Emily, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air, but no words came. I reached across the table, laying my hand gently over Emily's. "Thank you," I whispered, "for speaking when it mattered most." Emily squeezed my hand back. "You taught me to. I just needed to remember." The silence that followed wasn't like before. It wasn't heavy with fear. It was sharp with truth, with exposure, with the rawness of what could no longer be hidden. Karen finally snapped her purse shut, her voice brittle as glass. "This isn't over." But even she knew her threat rang hollow. Michael lingered a moment, his eyes red, his shoulders slumped. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Emily. He just followed Karen out, the door closing behind them with a finality that felt like the end of something long rotting. I turned back to Emily. She was still standing tall, though her chest rose and fell with nerves. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. For years, I had been the one protecting her. Tonight, she had protected me. The night had not yet settled into quiet when the storm of words began again. Karen returned with a fury I had only seen glimpses of before. Her face was blotched red, her eyes sharp with rage, and her voice cracked like thunder. "You don't understand," she screamed, clutching at the back of a chair as if to steady herself. "You don't know what it was like growing up with nothing, watching my classmates wear new shoes while mine had holes, seeing families go on vacations while I lied about ours. Do you know what that does to a child? Do you?" Her voice shook, but there was no remorse in it, only anger. She paced, her words tumbling out. "Every time I walked into a store, I felt smaller than everyone else. Every birthday party I couldn't attend because we couldn't afford a gift. You gave us food, sure, but I never stopped feeling poor. That shame, it never left me." I sat still, watching her unravel, my hands folded in my lap. For the first time, she was letting me see the roots of her bitterness. But instead of compassion, I felt clarity. Michael spoke next, his voice lower, almost strangled. He didn't pace. He leaned against the wall, his arms crossed tightly, his head bowed. "You think Karen's the only one who knows humiliation?" His voice cracked. 2008 destroyed me. You remember, don't you, Mom? The crash? I lost everything I had built. The business, the house we were eyeing, the respect I thought I earned. His shoulders shook as he spoke, though his face stayed hard. I was a failure. I couldn't look at you. Couldn't look at Karen. couldn't look at myself. And every time I saw you sitting there, steady, untouched, it burned. You were safe. You had what I didn't, and I hated it. Karen whipped around, seizing on his words. Exactly. You sat on your savings while we bled. You think that money wasn't meant to be shared? That it wasn't owed to us after all those years of scraping by? Her voice rose to a shriek. We suffered, and you watched. You could have made it easier, but you chose not to. You chose to protect yourself. Don't you dare judge us now for taking what should have been ours. Their voices collided in the room, a storm of confession and accusation. For a moment, I simply let it wash over me. Then, with a steady breath, I stood. Enough. The single word froze them. They stared at me, panting, expecting, perhaps even hoping for me to bend, to show some sign of weakness, to let their pain excuse their betrayal. I looked first at Karen. I understand shame. I lived through it too. I was the one patching those shoes, stretching every dollar, making dinners out of scraps. You weren't the only child of poverty. I was the mother of it. But suffering is not a license to wound others. Pain explains behavior, but it does not excuse it. I turned to Michael, my son, his face pale under the weight of my gaze. Yes, 2008 was cruel. I remember watching you break under it. I wanted to help, but I couldn't. Hand you resilience like a check. You had to rebuild it yourself. And instead, you decided to tear me down to cover your scars. But pain is not a reason to betray. Failure is not a free pass to steal. My voice grew firm, the weight of decades pressing into every word. We all suffer. We all stumble. But suffering is not a weapon to be used against the people who love you. And betrayal doesn't turn into loyalty just because it was born from struggle. Karen shook her head violently, tears streaking her cheeks. You don't get it. You never... I do get it. I cut her off sharply. More than you think. But here is the truth. You both had choices. And you chose greed. You chose lies. You chose to betray not only me, but your own daughter. Emily, standing quietly by the door until now, stepped forward. Her voice was calm but unwavering. Mom, Dad, you always told me we were a family, but what you've done doesn't look like family. Grandma's right. Struggle doesn't justify cruelty, and I won't stand by it anymore. Michael's face crumpled, his eyes closing as if Emily's words cut deeper than mine ever could. Karen's mouth twisted, but no sound came out. The silence that followed was suffocating. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart steady. Then I spoke the words that sealed the moment. Pain is not an excuse for betrayal, and I will not let my life's work be the casualty of yours. The room seemed to still after that. Karen collapsed into the chair, sobbing, her shoulders heaving with every breath. Michael pressed a hand to his face, unable to look at me, unable to look at Emily. I felt no triumph, only a solemn strength. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one carrying their burdens. They were carrying the weight of their own choices. The moving truck rumbled to a stop in front of my new house in Astoria. It was small, nothing extravagant, painted a pale gray that blended with the salty mist rolling off the Columbia River. But the porch faced the water, and I could already imagine mornings with a cup of coffee, listening to the gulls and waves. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement, a clean start. Emily hopped out of the passenger seat of her car, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up. She looked younger than ever, yet stronger too. Without needing to say anything, she came to my side, took one of the lighter boxes, and together we carried the first load inside. The living room smelled faintly of pine, the floors creaked in places, and the kitchen was modest. But I felt more peace here, standing in a bare room with stacked boxes than I ever had in that grand old house filled with suspicion. Emily set down her box and smiled softly. It's cozy, Grandma. I think it suits you." I looked around and nodded. "It suits us. There's nothing heavy here, nothing chained to old wounds." She glanced at me as if testing whether I really meant it. I gave her a small smile and she relaxed, letting the silence settle between us in a way that wasn't awkward but grounding. As the hours passed, we unpacked in quiet rhythm. She handed me books one by one while I lined them on a short shelf by the window. She hung my coats in the small hall closet. I folded quilts into a cedar chest while she filled the kitchen cabinets with plates and mugs. Neither of us spoke much, but every motion seemed to say what words could not. We are together. We are safe. We are enough. At one point, I paused by the window, gazing out at the wide stretch of the Columbia River. Fishing boats drifted in the distance. The water shimmered under the muted afternoon sun. I breathed deeply, the salt air filling my chest. Emily came up beside me. "Do you miss the old house?" she asked quietly. I thought carefully before answering. The house, number the years, maybe. There were good memories before everything soured, but holding on to a house because of memories is like carrying a broken vase. It only cuts deeper the longer you try. She nodded, her hand brushing mine. "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you chose to keep me in it." Her voice cracked slightly, and I turned to her, cupping her cheek gently. "Emily, you were the one who saw through everything. When everyone else tried to silence me, you told me the truth. That matters more than any inheritance or trust fund ever could." She swallowed hard and leaned against me for a moment, her head resting on my shoulder. Later, as the sun dipped lower, we sat together on the porch, sharing takeout fish and chips from a small diner down the street. The paper bag crinkled between us, the smell of vinegar and fried batter mingling with sea air. Emily laughed when I fumbled with the flimsy plastic fork. "You'd think for all the money they charge, they'd at least give us decent utensils." Her laugh was light, and I joined in. For the first time in months, maybe years, I let myself laugh without the edge of worry. My phone buzzed on the porch railing. A single text. From Michael. Just one line. "We can't access anything. What did you do?" I didn't reply. I slid the phone back, turned it face down. The silence between Emily and me was worth more than explanations. Karen had tried calling too, I knew. But the truth was final now. The accounts were closed, the access revoked. Every reckless swipe of their cards now met with decline. Every attempt to bend my trust into their gain now slammed against the wall I had finally built. Emily studied my face, then asked softly, "Do you feel guilty?" I considered the question, letting the river winds wash over me. "No," I said finally. "I feel lighter. They made their choices, and I made mine. Protecting myself and you is not cruelty, it's clarity." The sky turned pink over the water, and a hush fell over the porch. For once, I didn't need to fill it with words. Inside, the house was still half full of boxes. There was much to arrange, much to settle. But in that moment, with Emily beside me and the sea stretching wide and endless, I felt settled in the only way that mattered. The old chapter had closed. This house, this town, this life. It was the final step, not a retreat, but a choice. I had taken back what was mine, and more importantly, I had kept what was true. The house was quiet that evening. The ocean outside stretched wide and silver under the moonlight, its rhythm steady against the shore. I sat at the small wooden desk by my bedroom window, pen in hand, paper waiting. For years, I had left things unsaid, swallowed words to keep peace. But this was not silence. This was choosing the right voice, the right listener. I began to write, the pen gliding slowly, each word deliberate. My dear Emily, life will offer you tables dressed in fine linens, with chairs that look grand, but are meant only to test your patience. Remember this, Never sit where your place exists only to measure how much you can endure. Rise, walk away, and set your own table. Invite those who honor your presence, not those who consume it. I paused, my eyes catching the reflection of the lamp's glow against the window pane. Beyond it, the ocean moved as if nodding in quiet agreement. You chose truth when it was heavy. You stood by me when silence was easier. That courage is the inheritance I leave you, not money, not deeds, but the knowledge that you have the right to choose peace over poison, dignity over compromise. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote the final lines. One day, you will have your own home, your own family. Build it not on fear or guilt, but on respect. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember what I told you. You are enough. I set the pen down and folded the letter carefully, sliding it into an envelope with her name written across the front. It wasn't just paper, it was the legacy I wanted her to carry. On the small table beside me sat a steaming cup of chamomile tea. I lifted it, savoring the calm aroma. As I sipped, the phone buzzed on the counter again. The screen lit up with familiar names. Michael, then Karen, then Michael again. I didn't even reach for it. I tapped the side button, silencing the vibration, turning the world back to quiet. The calls no longer held power over me. They were just noise now, desperate echoes of a game already ended. I walked to the porch with my tea, settling into the rocking chair that faced the Columbia. The air was cool, touched with salt and cedar. The river and sea met in a horizon that stretched endlessly, neither hurried nor delayed. Emily came out for a moment barefoot, carrying a blanket. She draped it over my shoulders, kissed my temple lightly, and whispered, "Good night, Grandma." Then she went inside, leaving me to the night and the water. Alone, I rocked slowly, listening. The waves spoke in their eternal language, not demanding, not pleading, just being. I thought of all the noise I had endured, the arguments, the manipulations, the false smiles at polished tables, how small they seemed against this vast, patient expanse. I finished my tea and set the cup down beside me. My gaze lifted to the horizon. It wasn't triumph I felt, nor bitterness. It was steadiness, a calm deeper than victory. They had taken years of my trust, but they could not take the core of who I was. Tonight proved it. My dignity was intact, my peace reclaimed, my voice finally steady. And so, as the tide rolled in and the stars broke through the mist, I let the quiet hold me. Not as a woman abandoned or betrayed, but as someone who had chosen, finally, to sit at her own table. The Columbia stretched out before me, endless and indifferent, yet strangely comforting. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, letting the noble weight of the moment settle. For the first time in a long time, I felt not just alive, but whole.